So class, hopefully the last 2 days of e-learning going through, you have just sort of been like, yeah, piece of cake, I know how to solve equations. If you've really felt like you struggled, that really is an area that you need to make sure you're continuing to keep in your brain, because it's just going to be assumed from this point moving forward in all of your math classes that you know how to solve equations. So that really is something that you need to feel confident and have underneath your belt. Now, where we're going today, you might need a few more reminders, because this isn't something that we do quite as daily, not something that we've had quite as much experience with, but still something really important. Okay, and this is going to be reviewed today with sort of our graphs of lines. Okay, and just sort of remembering those basic pieces that we've talked about with graphing and equations and lines. So the first thing that we should know is that we have 3 different ways that we can write and graph lines. So we have standard form, we have point slope form, and we have slope intercept form. Okay, where standard form is where we have that format of ax plus by equals c. So we have something like 4x minus 2y equals 16. Okay, and we said in standard form there were 2 things that we could find. We could find the x-intercept and we could find the y-intercept. And we find that x and y-intercept by plugging in 0 for the variable that we aren't trying to find. So if we want to find the x-intercept, we plug in 0 for y. And remember, we do that because an x-intercept always has a y value of 0, right? An x-intercept is on the x-axis, so our y value is 0. But again, when we plug in 0, it sort of makes all this go away, and we're just left with that equation of 4x equals 16. And that's then an equation that we can solve, and we get x equals 4. Okay, and then flip-flop if we want to find the y-intercept, right? We're plugging in 0 for x, and 4 times 0 is 0, and we're left with negative 2y equals 16. And that is something that we can solve, and we get y equals negative 8. Okay, so standard form, we can find the x and y-intercept, and we do that by plugging in 0 and sort of ignoring the other variable and solving. Point slope form was our format of y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, there were 2 things that we could find in point slope form, and that was a point and a slope. Okay, remembering that slope is always represented by the letter m. So if we have something like y plus 3 equals 1/2 times x minus 5. Okay, we can find the slope, which is our m. Now, our point, we have to do some remembering here. Remember, in any formula, when there is a subtraction sign, it's actually telling us to take the opposite of it. So when I'm finding my x and my y value for this ordered pair down here, I need to take the opposite of it. So while this looks like a negative 5 for my x sub 1, I'm plugging in a positive 5. Okay, and this looks like a positive 3, but my y sub 1 is really a negative 3. So my point would be 5 comma negative 3. Then our last one, which is slope-intercept form, which is the beloved formula. This is the one I hope we remember. This is the one we've used the most. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. We can find a slope and we can find a y-intercept. So maybe if we have y equals negative 5x minus 2, right, we can say that our slope or our m value is negative 5, and our y-intercept or our b value is negative 2. Okay, so we should definitely be able to find those values. I definitely feel like we should remember that at least we could solve all of these for y, and that we could graph in slope-intercept form. So if you don't remember how to graph in every form, at least know that you could solve for y and graph, 1/2 x plus 3, where we would start at 3 and then go up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, and that would be our line. we should also be able to graph with inequalities and remember those rules of inequalities. So very similar to what we were talking about when we were reviewing graphing on a number line, right? If we had something like y was greater than negative 2x plus 7, right? We should be able to look at this symbol and know whether it's dashed or solid and whether we shade above or below. So we would start at 7 because that's our b. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then our slope is negative 2. Slope we always want in a fraction format. So I'm putting that over 1. So it's to go down 2 over 1. Down 2 over 1. Okay, and again, if you're like, oh my gosh, I need way more information, she's going too fast, go back to some of those videos I linked at the top of the homepage that are from when we went through all of the instruction in its entirety in class. Okay, so when we look right here, remember no solid line underneath is like that open circle, but in this case, it's an open line, so it's our dashed line. Okay, and a greater than symbol tells us to shade above, a less than symbol tells us to shade below, so greater than we're shading above. Okay, so this tells us that anything over here in this shaded area is a solution. So there's an infinite number of solutions over here. It tells us that anything over here is not a solution. Okay, and then remember that dashed line isn't actually there. So we can get as close to this line as we want, but anything that's actually on the line is not a solution when it's dashed. If that line was solid, it would be a solution, but because it's dashed, it is not a solution. Okay. Couple then last reminders. I said if you didn't feel like you could graph in slope-intercept form, you should at least feel like you could solve for y. So if we had something like, I don't know, 8x minus 4y equals 20, right? Remember to solve this for y, we move our x first. So it's a positive 8x, so we subtract 8x. Once on each side of the equal sign. So over here on the left, we are left with a negative 4y. Over here on the right, we have a negative 8x plus 20, because remember, we want the x first and the b second. Okay, then we will go through and we will undo multiplication with division. Okay, we're dividing in all three places. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. And then we would be able to graph in that format. Last thing with lines is we should be able to find slope, especially slope between 2 points. Oh, I don't know. So, right, our slope formula says y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so we're going to do every ordered pair is an x comma y. So we're going to do a y2 minus a y1, where we're doing 5 minus, because that's part of the formula, negative 7. And then negative 2 minus 3. Use a calculator, know how to clean up those signs, whatever you sort of prefer. We'll get 12 over negative 5. Remember, slope is always reduced in proper fraction form. That cannot be reduced any further, so we're done there. We have some weird slopes, so think about what it means if we get a 0 on top or a 0 on bottom. Okay, remember how 0 on top is that no slope, that 0 slope, and 0 on bottom is our undefined slope. So go through and do the practice for today. If you have any questions, reach out, let me know. Otherwise, you could watch some of the other videos or join me for live class on Canvas conferences. Have a great rest of the day.